The streets of Ottawa are largely clear today after Canadian police arrested almost 50 anti-vaccine mandate protesters yesterday. The protests dragged on for weeks before Prime Minister Justin Trudeau invoked emergency powers, giving authorities the ability to clear the streets and even seize bank accounts belonging to the protesters. Protest organizers say at least 3 of their leaders have been arrested in recent days. So with the situation up north seemingly under control, all eyes are now focused on a second potential convoy that's reportedly preparing to leave California for D.C. later this week. Congressional committees were briefed on the possibility of a trucker protest here in the U.S., according to Politico. And roads are already being closed down around Capitol Hill in advance of President Biden's State of the Union address on March 1st. So what can officials here in America learn from the Canadian trucker protest? Joining us now from Ottawa is Ian Austin. He's the Canada correspondent for the New York Times. Welcome, Ian.
Hi.
So you're joining us live from Ottawa tonight. So what's the situation like on the ground right now?
Well, it's a dramatic turnaround from the last 3 weeks. The streets are empty downtown. Downtown's been encircled by a large, sort of 12-foot-high fence. And the truckers are basically gone. I found a small enclave of them about 60 miles east of Ottawa towards Montreal. We don't know what they're doing, but it is a very, very small group. So the city's gone from being paralyzed by truckers to being effectively paralyzed by police now.
So we saw the mass arrests began after some of the key leaders of the protests were themselves arrested over the past couple of days. So what can you say about the state of the so-called Freedom Convoy movement? Do you think you're going to see a regrouping after they've largely been cleared out from downtown Ottawa?
Many people I've spoken to don't think this is actually a movement. This was a sort of disparate group that started out with a specific complaint about vaccine mandates for cross-border truckers. A number of people who've been involved in far-right political movements in Canada, like a Yellow Vest movement, kind of cottoned onto this and fundraised for them. But it never coalesced around a single leader. A lot of the protesters, when you asked them what they wanted, they mostly would just tell you freedom. They couldn't explain much more than that. It was a very, very incoherent and fragmented movement. It also was quite small. I mean, in a country of 36 million, at the most, there were perhaps 450 trucks. So it was, very, very much a fringe thing. Then there were activities. There was harassment of citizens who live in downtown Ottawa. There was a copycat protest at a border crossing in Alberta where weapons were seized and people were charged with conspiring to murder policemen. That alienated a lot of Canadians, even Canadians who were frustrated about the pandemic and pandemic measures continuing.
Hey, that's an interesting point. So, because I'm wondering, how did things get so heated there in the first place? I mean, Canada has this reputation for its niceness and civility, unlike its hothead cousins to the south. How did things just go so wild so fast?
Well, this started out in Alberta, which is the most American of Canadian provinces, has always had a sort of very strong, vociferous right-wing approach to politics. So it started out there. I guess how things, they were able to have this huge impact, mostly because of what now people see as a huge mistake by police. Many truckers have told me that they were surprised as they drove into Ottawa on the Trans-Canada Highway that policemen were helpfully directing them towards Parliament Hill. And once they got down there and filled the streets, several of them told me, well, I thought I was going to go, but I've stayed. It was a monumental policing error in retrospect.
Interesting. So that then speaks to, maybe some long-term implications of protests like this. Will it lead to an emboldening of the right, as you referenced, in what is generally a center-left country?
I think it's too early to say that, but the consensus is not. I mean, the reason these protesters were able to have such a huge impact. They crippled the city. Major shopping malls have been closed. Thousands of people have been out of work for 3 weeks. Was the using trucks as a tool. I mean, some of the organizers of this came here a year ago and with this crazy plan to have the Queen's representative take over the government with the appointed Senate. Nobody paid attention to them. This time they come and they shut down the city. They they paralyzed the capital of Canada, thanks to trucks. So I think, people are going to have to assess in the future, consider in the future, people using motor vehicles as a protest tool.
Interesting. Ian Austin, thank you so much from Canada. Really appreciate you. So, Ohio, what a mess in the Buckeye State. How Republicans are failing again and again when it comes to congressional redistricting. That's next.